Welcome to the Pansa Pansa Forum. In the Yoruba language, the word pansa is usually injected into poetry to express an uncomfortable, uncensored, and inconvenient truth. The Pansa Pansa Forum is candid conversations about the life of African immigrants in America as it relates to their adaptation to their new home. While some may find it easy to integrate and can balance between retaining the original African culture while accepting the culture of their new home, many continue to struggle to find a balance between both worlds.
Hello and welcome to Pansa Pansa Live. This is a podcast where we discuss the lives of African immigrants and their assimilation into Western society as they raise younger generations in a country that is quite different from their own. We also explore the experiences of children of immigrants as they balance the African and Western cultures. We present to you this informative, interesting, and expansive dialogue about the intricate experiences of African immigrants in America.
Welcome to another episode of Pansa Pansa Podcast, the podcast where we explore stories, journey, ideas shaping African diaspora around the world. On this platform, we always dive deep into a topic that shapes the fabrics of this nation, which the immigrant experience. Today's guest is Yolanda Maha, a South African-born social entrepreneur, non-profit leader, media professional, and passionate advocate for African immigrants and the refugee. Yolanda is the founder and the executive director of African Community Forum, a non-profit organization based in New York that works to improve workforce development, entrepreneurship, education, community support for the African immigrants and the refugee. She is also the founder of African Desk, an initiative that connects African with New York fashion, media, education, and creative industry. Before moving to United States for more than 2 decades ago, Yolanda built a successful career in South African fashion and media industries. Her own immigrant journey became the inspiration behind her lifelong commitment to helping African immigrants successfully building a new life in America while preserving their African identity. In this conversation, we're going to explore our upbringing in South Africa, our journey, immigrant journey, motherhood, race relation in America, African identity, entrepreneurship, leadership, and our vision for creating stronger economic and cultural bridge between Africa and the United States. So Yolanda, welcome to Pansa Pansa. I'm really so delighted to have you on this show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Kemi. Thank you. The introduction is amazing. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate. You're making me realize I don't really get my work acknowledged that much. So I think this is the second time I have had to speak about my work, and I'm excited about it.
Of course, we have to embrace, empower each other. That's what we're here for. So before discussing your work, I want our listener to understand the environment that shaped you. Every migrant carries more than the luggages. They carry memories, tradition, values, and the life lesson from home. Can you take us back to your childhood? Tell us about your family background. What was it like to grow up in South Africa, specifically regarding the cultural tradition and the value that were instilled in you to make you who you are today?
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's so beautiful that you go back. You track the journey back, right? So I was born in South Africa, of course, in Soweto. And I stayed in Soweto for 10 years. And then my mother got married again. And then we moved to the east side of Johannesburg, which is in Springs. And then we stayed there until I was 19. When I was 19, I then went to university, Wits University in Johannesburg. From there, that's when I picked up how much I was interested in creativity and just the business world. I found myself very, very fascinated by the business of fashion. And the reason why I love fashion, because my mother was very big on fashion. Everything about her. She had to dress well. Her house had to be furnished very well. Her kids had to look right. She was an entrepreneur. She drove the right car. She was one of the very few women who was making her own money and raising 5 kids by herself. Yes. And so, yeah, she raised us, and in her raising us, I picked up the love of fashion. And then when I went to West University during my second year, we used to watch a program called Video Fashion. And I remember to be like at 12 in the afternoon when we didn't have classes, we would go to the media room and then would sit there and just watch video fashion. And I started getting fascinated by fashion. And that's when I started also building my first magazine.
Wow.
Yes. So I built a magazine and then I sent it to a publishing house. And then the editor calls me. And I was like, oh, wow, I thought this was like just me being fascinated. So she calls me, she interviews me, and then she offers me a job. I was like, a job? I'm still about to start my third year, so I wasn't expecting to have a job. She offers me a job, and I tell her I'm still in school. I don't think my mother will agree to this. And she says, you will balance school and then you'll balance work, because I saw your work. I really liked it for a person who has no experience in the industry, in the publishing industry to be specific. So I take the job. It pays about 2,000 rand. I'm excited for the money. I'm not even thinking. I'm like, I'm going to go to school and then have money and then have a social life that is, and I had the most amazing social life being a student. So I take the job and then I start working and then I finished it. So my degree was 4 years. So I was studying my third year and then I was going to go to my fourth year. And I took the job, and that job opened up the world of work for me in a way that I don't even know how to explain. And yeah, so that was my work journey, the beginning of my work journey. And I realized I love fashion, but I also love publishing. So when I was working in South Africa during my third year of college, as they call it here, I had a job with a publishing house, and my specialty was fashion, beauty, and design. And that was a job I was doing. It was like so fascinating for me to have taken. So how I ended up designing a magazine, which is a very fascinating story on its own. A friend of mine, Tandiswa, who's a very big musician in South Africa. I think I was doing my second year and she just started doing her first year. So I went to a room and there was Vogue magazine. And I remember just getting fascinated. So I said to her, can you loan me some of your magazines and then I'll bring them back? And she said, sure, you can take 3 at a time. So I took 3 and I took them to my room. And I just used to be like so fascinated. Like, how does this thing work? And I didn't even understand the relationship between editorial and then advertising, right? I just saw these beautiful pictures. I was like, let me do my own version of the magazine, right? Like, not even understanding how the business works. And so that's what I sent. I sent like a prototype to a publishing house, and then they liked it. I was like, how is this even possible? Like,
it's been in you.
Yes. It was the beginning of my career.
How did that cultural background or the experience growing up in South Africa prepare you for living in America, many other places that you've traveled to?
You know, I've always said that my mother used the tools of a third world country to prepare me for a first world country. And that is very much true. You know, my mother was very intentional in the way she lived. She was a single parent. At some point, we had my stepfather, but he wasn't as strong. My mother was always the strength of the family. So she was a single parent to 5 kids, and she didn't tire, advocating for them. But one of the things that I used to love about my mother is that she gave us the voice, the right to have a say, the right to even challenge her. And of course, when you're young, you don't really even think like this is actually very important in one's upbringing. So, but one of the things that I love that she used to allow us to do is like she would sit in the middle of the living room and then we would talk. And this person would talk and then that person would talk and we're turning our heads and she doesn't intervene, she doesn't interfere. She just turns the head and then turns the head and then she's laughing and we're going back and forth. And it only hit me later that actually, she was preparing us to be leaders indirectly, she gave us the right to have a voice, to say what we need to say. I remember when we were young, my brother sort of had a clash with my sister. And my brother was rude to my mother. And I actually didn't like it. That one incident that I remember taught me the importance of advocating for others when they are not able to advocate for myself. And at that time, I think what bothered me the most is that my sister was hurt by my brother in a way that she became mute, right? She almost couldn't represent herself or even just defend herself against my brother. And then I went to my mother and I was like, that's just not going to happen. We cannot allow my brother to kind of dominate, especially because we're girls. He's the only boy. It's not a healthy relationship. I didn't put it that way at the time, but that was exactly what I was listening to her. And she didn't take it personal. She was like, okay. And then she went to correct it. And I think that moment prepared me for New York, because when I moved to New York, I realized I have no fear of finding the CEO, the executive director, the chancellor, the inspector general. Like, those are my people.
But, she already did that in terms of an African mother raising 5 children on her own and having them sit down and talk, dialogue back and forth and listen to them. She already prepared you for, what it is like to be a listening ear.
Yeah.
Even for your own child, for your own, the children you're going to have, all of you are going to have in the future. So she already prepared that. And for her to listen to your input on raising her son, especially African mothers,
yes,
raising their son, she opened that door for all of you.
Yeah.
She also opened that door for your brother also.
It's very, very important in raising children and giving them a voice, because I realize that the way we're raised shapes how we step out of the door, how we interact with the world. In fact, it took therapy for me to understand that you can get an understanding of who your friends or your enemies are going to be based on the relationships you have at home, because we attract outside the people we interact with at home. And so, so I'm very grateful for her for that.
Yes, she, such a powerful woman. So every immigrant remembers the day they left home. Behind every migration step is a mixture of hope, doubt, sacrifice, and courage. The American dream we know is very powerful, but the reality of landing on the shore is often far more complex. After 2 decades here, I want to know about some of these questions. What was your biggest surprise during your earlier years in this United States of America? Both positive things that, exceed your expectation and the negative experience that ever broke your heart or shocked you that, wow, this is going on in United States?
I just want to step back and step my journey from when I was in South Africa. Things, like when you're in Africa, you have ideas about what America is, right? But one of the things that I and now understand that is not. I used to think coming to America was difficult. And I thought just doing the visa and getting here was like the thing. And then I found out after I had worked on my visa and got my ticket that was just a basic, I had not even scratched the surface. That was an entry. I just took the first step, right? Because we think it's so difficult. I talk to people and I try and coach people about moving here. People want to move here and they're like, it's so difficult. I'm like, no, the visa is the easiest part. It looks difficult, but it's not. Living here, stepping here, trying to create a base for yourself that you call home. Is the part that I find very, very tricky, right, for immigrants. Because, when you're in Africa, you have an aunt, you have a mother, you have a home, you can go back home, and there's aunts and uncles and cousins. When you get to America the way I didn't have an aunt, I didn't have a cousin, I didn't have a sister. It was me, myself, and I. And I was like, wow, I had to build from scratch. The first 3 months were the most tough 3 months for me, trying to figure out where am I going, what am I here to do? Yeah. They were also the loneliest, right? Because I was suddenly far away from home. I didn't have the cushion of family and familiarity. I had to, you're trying to figure out the subway. You're trying to figure out, I had a roommate. I didn't have a roommate in South Africa. You're trying to figure out what does it look like to stay with people or not family. How do I find a job? Oh, there's this thing called a resume. I need a resume. Wow. The way I used to get jobs in South Africa, I would just send a letter to say, I think this is what you need and this is how I feel this is how I can fill the gap, right? So finding a job for me, I didn't even have to do it through the traditional way of doing things. I would just write to companies or send a prototype for a magazine. That's how I got my first job. So I come to America and they tell me I need to put a resume together. And I was like, oh, okay. I understand now it's a standard here, right? But it wasn't really a standard when I was growing up. In fact, I got my first job. I was going to print my resume. And then the woman who printed my resume, so a person gave me directions to go to the left because my sense of direction can be out. I went to the right, ended up in some building, and then I ended up in an office, and the woman said, "Can I help you?" I said, "I've come to print my resume." And she said, "We don't print resumes here, but I can help you. I can print your resume." So I said, "Please, can you help me? I'll pay you." And she was like, "You don't have to pay me. This is an office." So she takes my floppy disk or whatever I had, and she prints the resume. And she said, "Actually, I'm looking for an assistant." I was like,
It works.
"Okay, what kind of assistant? An office manager?" So he said, "Can I take a look at your resume?" I'm like, "Sure." I'm like, "Why?" Like, I'm very confused. She looks at the resume and said, "Yeah, we pay $500 per week and you can start on Monday." Really? Like, I was still going to circulate my resume. And there you are offering me a job. So that's how I got my first job in America. After having landed here, I think I'd been here for like 2-3 months. And yeah, it was such an eye opener, just that first experience.
And you are so lucky because not many people will have opportunity to work as a new immigrant in a place like that. Somebody saying, "I just need an assistant," and she didn't push through and say, "Where you from?" All kinds of things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're lucky. So was there ever a moment you questioned your decision to migrate, and what kept you moving forward, especially if you can give advice to many of our new immigrants coming in today's world?
There are so many moments. The first 3 years were tough because you're still trying to figure out who you are, what are you here to do. So just to give you background, I'm a fashion journalist. And so when I first came here, the first year, while I had a job, I asked my boss to give me time to attend New York Fashion Week because because of being a fashion journalist, I qualified to cover New York Fashion Week. And that was exciting, because for a week, you get to meet celebrities, you meet other journalists from other countries. New York City is one of the most well-managed, well-put together events in the city that teaches you so much and attracts almost everyone from around the globe. So I have friends who are journalists in Italy, in other areas, other parts of Africa, in China. You keep going. I have all kinds of friends that I met through New York Fashion Week. So yeah, it just took a while for me to figure out what do I want to do. And that process alone was frustrating enough for me sometimes to want to pack my bags and go back, right? And because, during Fashion Week, I used to make a lot of money, right? And then I used to have stable income for my job. But when I took a break from my job, then there was uncertainty. It was uncertain as to how am I going to make a living on a consistent basis and still cover my needs. I moved from staying with someone to getting my own apartment. And that was not that's an expensive. It's expensive to have to pay rent every month, electricity, food, clothing. I've always been business minded. So I was constantly experimenting with what business am I starting? What ideas am I putting? I'm big on pushing ideas, building ideas. I'm even big on creating spaces for people to dream and have no fear about or reservations about dreaming. So I was testing all kinds of ideas and it was not easy. It was not easy because I didn't know this place. I didn't have the networks. I didn't understand how the city works. We come from places where government is very neglectful. And so when we step into spaces where government is attentive, we almost don't know how to engage. We don't even think from a race point of view, we have a right? Because in South Africa caters to Black people, whereas America caters to white people. So when you're an immigrant and you're Black and you come to America, first of all, people bombard you about racism. To a point where you start making it your story, right? And I'm not suggesting that we don't. I'm not suggesting that we not become alert to the dynamics of racism. But one thing that bothers me about racism is that people talk about it without providing solutions. So we end up for years just getting stuck in this same conversation of the injustice of racism instead of building around it, of which I've creatively come to a place to do so. So I had so many times when I just wanted to pack my bags and go to South Africa because it was just, as I said to my therapist at some point, I said, when I became a mother, I said to him, New York does not have aunts and uncles.
Yeah.
And so it makes it tougher to navigate. Yeah. Because you don't have people to fall back on. Yeah.
And that's very powerful what you just said. You have to worry about racism. You have to build yourself around it. To the extent they push it, say it is not because it doesn't happen, but we cannot allow that to restrain us from shifting over to the other side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
white space.
Yeah.
To the extent that some of our children of color are having difficulty navigating that space. They've never been exposed to that environment.
But, I always tell people racism is a business. It's a big business. It's a business that keeps you in your place, right? And the question is, what is that place? What's dangerous about racism is that it's not even a color game. It's a power game.
Thank you.
It's an economic game. It defines who gets what. It defines who sits where. It defines who gets access to what, right? And when I moved to New York, I used to think there were certain things that were set for white people. I didn't think I have a right to New York. I didn't even think I could approach a councilman, an assemblyman, a senator, because I didn't think those things were for me. It took my therapist to shake me out. And she was like, Yolanda, and he was a Jew. He was like, Yolanda, I feel like I need to start a masterclass on racism and expose it for the ugly part it is, because you can stand up to anyone and you can question anything in this country, irrespective of your color. And when he said that, he just gave me permission to almost be like a white man, to show up like a white man.
And do you see how powerful it is, what you just said? Because when I'm talking about therapies to many of our people, many of people of color, they seek therapy from people of color because that's what they feel comfortable with.
Yes.
But in some situation, therapists could also create a scary image for you of the place where you're supposed to be. This is a white man telling you, go ahead, step in. You could question anybody without being pulled back.
Yeah.
And my question is for any listener, is to understand that we need to understand this and we need to practice this. And also, in order for our children to be successful, we need to empower them.
Yes.
Okay, white people are just human beings like us. And another thing you said that is so powerful is that it's not about race, it's about power.
Yes.
Because I've seen Black people in the position of power also, that they just don't, allow just anybody in.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And with race and power, you get to understand how, as Black people, we perceive power, right? If you go into a Jewish world, power is distributed.
Mhm.
Power is about access. If you look at a Black world, power is a dividing force.
Yeah.
It's also a limiting force.
Yes.
That after a while, as Black people, we are invested in our own oppression.
Yes.
And we use power to oppress
Mm.
ourselves, right? It's disturbing and annoying because it just makes things difficult for a Black person. If you can't have access within a Black world, you're not going to have access within a white world.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And in many cases, the continuous talking about issue of race all the time scares some people not to step forward
Yes.
into the white space because they feel like, this is what are being told, but they are just human beings just like anybody else. They
Yeah.
feel pain just like anybody else. They have discomfort life. They have many other things just like anybody. There's poor white, there's poor Black people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when we fight, we give the voice mostly to unfortunate people. How can we make their life better, whether they are Black or white?
Yeah.
Because when we focus too many things on race alone, we are not really addressing many other issues that is going on also within Black community.
Yes.
Black on Black crime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Black on Black mistreatment.
Mm-hmm.
Because we only focus our attention when it comes to race. That's one thing that I've learned in America.
Yeah, and we give the impression that if race was not the issue, we would be living perfect lives. And it's not true. Yeah, in fact, if race was not an issue, I think as a Black society, we would be in a very bad place, because most of the time you see just the treatment, the way we treat each other, the way we don't even have a vision for our kids.
Yeah.
Right? Our kids have to, in order to push their visions and agendas, have to beg the white world to allow them the right to do so, right? We don't create that structure. Up until today, I have been, for the past 2 months, have been doing an accelerator in Nigeria. And one of the facilitators today said something very powerful. He said, African businesses are built on survival, whereas our counterparts, they build on making things light for the next generation.
Yeah.
Yeah. The businesses survive generations. Whereas within Africa, when the founder dies, the business is gone.
And it's so right. And there's so many powerful Nigerian men that they were very successful. The moment they died, everything went down the drain. The next generation will never hear of them or know what they have contributed. And sometimes I will also criticize our people who contribute to unnecessary things.
Yes.
Men having too many wives, having too many children, that, they become a burden.
Yes.
For their children, for younger generation.
Yep.
So it's part of what everybody have their own sickness, I will call it, to address.
Yes.
Have our own ailment that we need to address within whatever community we belong. So I want to find out, becoming an American while remaining Africa, immigrant isn't just simply changing countries. It's learning how to build a new identity without losing your original one. Do you ever struggle with feeling of belongings? And have you ever been too African in America or too America while returning home? Because I know you go home very often.
Yes. So the first question, an identity crisis being African. New York City has, and I'm grateful to New York, right? When I came here, I was African. I don't think I was strong in my Africanness as I am now.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've become African in a way that is so beautiful, because New York City gives you the right to be unique without questioning it. It will actually support it if you insist on that support as well. So I am a better African and a much more aware African now than I used to be coming in.
Wow.
I didn't celebrate my Africanness the way I do now. Like, now I eat, breathe, I wake up, it's all about Africa, Africa. In one of my, I do art therapy every Thursday. When I'm not there, if I'm traveling, they'll say something like, we missed our lessons on Africa because you were not here. So we want to find out when are you when you're coming back. I'm like, okay, I'll be back in like 2-3 weeks. They're like, okay. So they call me Miss Africa.
Wow.
Yes, because I wish I celebrated being African as I was coming in, right? But I couldn't have, because I also had challenges about being African, right? I'll tell you, one of the challenges I used to have when I was coming in, I've always had a very complicated relationship with South Africans, being a South African. Yeah. Something I literally wanted to create a platform to talk about when it comes to Black people and where they feel they belong, right? So when I came to New York, I was really fed up. I was tired of South Africa. I could see that South Africa would get to where it is. And yeah, and I was worried about it. But through therapy, I got to clean up the wounds as to what didn't work about me. I remember walking into room with one of my therapists, and I said, I don't think I understand Black people. And she was a white woman. She was like, what is happening? Is everything okay? I was like, yeah. Are you feeling unsafe? I was like, no, not physically, but emotionally and mentally, yes. I feel unsafe. And she was like, okay, let's unpack this. How did you get here? I was like, you know what? I have never had the platform to discuss this, but I've never felt safe within a Black world, being a Black person. And she was like, okay. And so she said to me, what's not happening? And at that time, it was not being a Black person, it was being a South African. I just didn't feel safe. I noticed as I was growing up in South Africa that there are certain things you can't discuss, right? Things you can't talk about, things you can't raise, right? Because then the society shuns you. Yeah. Even family, even till this day, family members, if you address something, they stop talking to you. So I was just troubled by that. And the longer I stayed in New York, the more I was becoming, the distance between my family and I was growing. Right? We're not seeing eye to eye. There were expectations who I should be in relation to the family without them giving back. And I was not buying it, right? I was getting exhausted by it. So when I went to the therapist, I was like, I think people are going to destroy me. And she was like, what happened? I was like, you can never say some conversations are not welcome. And I need to be part of a society where all conversations are welcome, because I come from a home where all conversations were welcome. So I don't know this business of staying mute about things falling apart. So I said to the therapist, I think I had been here 15 years at that time. I said I had predicted that what's happening in South Africa would happen. And a lot of people asked me how. They said, there's no magic to it. You just have to tell yourself the truth at that moment. And one thing as Africans, we just don't know how to do is to tell ourselves the truth at that moment. Yeah. I think the biggest injustice that Black people, Africans, and South Africans afford themselves is the betrayal of self, not being able to tell yourself the truth at that moment, right? Because when you miss that moment, that very moment when things are not right, when you miss the opportunity to say, this is not working, you are missing an almost lifetime of an opportunity to address a layer of things.
But I'm going to come to the question of South Africa later on, because, it has to have its discussion on itself. Most of us are not happy about what is going on in South Africa at this time. So do you ever felt you're too African in America, but to America when you return home, since, you always back and forth between America and South Africa?
That's a beautiful question, right? I've never been accused of being American. Never. Americans are like, oh, you have a strong South African accent. In South Africa, they go, oh, your accent hasn't changed. So no. One thing I've been accused of is being femme.
That's American. That's America that you adopted. So
I think that's my mother. I think my mother was femme. Yeah. So, and America is like that. So I fitted very well here. But in fact, I was shocked to a friend of mine said to me one day, it's amazing how much you love Africa. I was not even fully aware how much, as much as I was frustrated by Africa, how much I love Africa. And I said, why? She said, you support African businesses, you eat African food, you wear African clothes. She was going on and on about, and I was like, wow, it's, it's amazing. I've never, even in the midst of my frustration about Africa and Blackness and Black people, I've never disowned my Africanness.
Do you ever feel pressure to assimilate?
No.
No, okay.
I don't have to.
You don't have to, because you're already yourself. So with your background, how can African immigrant, you advise them to integrate without losing themselves? Because we have some of our people that there's need to integrate, but sometimes they feel like they have to lose themselves in order for them to integrate.
That's such a great question, right? The challenge about going to a new space is we have a tendency to want to fit, right? I've never had that need. I've never had a need to fit, even within a South African context. When I realized that certain things were not working for me in relation to South Africa, I slowly removed myself and chose to still stay South African by going to the events and doing all the South African things without necessarily belonging to a larger South African network.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge for a lot of people is people want to fit, they want to belong, right? And they want to be approved. So that's how a loss of identity begins to take shape.
Yeah.
Whereas on my part, I've never had a need to fit anywhere. I've always had a need to be accepted for who I am, which is why I left South Africa. Yeah, is that I was struggling to be accepted for who I am as a South African, a unique South Africa who does things differently. And I thought to myself, I need to move. And then I came to New York and I realized that my South Africanness is highly celebrated. I don't have to lose it.
Yeah. And that's very powerful, just to be yourself.
Yes.
You know who you are. You could go into any group, any diversity group, whether Black, white, name it, African, Asian, just be yourself.
Yes.
And there's no need for acceptance.
Yes.
Like you said. And that's what is actually pulling many of our people back. because you only see South African hanging out with South African, Nigerians hanging out only with Nigerians. People don't go into different groups to integrate because you could learn a lot from different groups. There's so many things you could learn from each other to, appreciate about each other. And that's what is moving you to where you are today,
Abs-
Uh-huh. And I
Yeah.
want to come out and talk to you about motherhood across culture because you're now a mother.
Yes.
Yes, migration, immigration transform not only individual but entire families.
Yes.
Parenting in another country often require balancing two cultures. I understand that, because I had to struggle with that myself. How has becoming a mother shaped your immigrant experience?
Now that I'm on the 16th year, of which I call it the 17th year, because when you're pregnant, I include that year. Now that I'm on the 17th year, having my son has been such a gift. I actually wish I had 3 kids. I yearn for 2 other kids because my son turned me into a hero, not just for him, but to myself, right? Being a parent in New York without a family or a strong community can either break you or build you up. For me, it built me up in ways I don't even know how to explain. I know this may sound crazy, but when my son is homeschooled, but before he was homeschooled, he went to schools. And I remember I never used to get along with the schools. I remember one day my son asking me, is there a school that you like? And my son is one of those free kids who can ask any question. Is there any school of mine that you've ever liked? And I always say to him, I realized that I had a yearning to be a principal of the school by virtue of how I just used to give principals of schools a hard time. Because did your kids went to school in which state?
In New York City.
In New York City. Oh, so you understand New York City. Okay. For me, the challenge when my son was studying school was just the disrespect that teachers and principals afford you. And for me, I just didn't know I didn't know how to take it. Some people tolerated it. Some people used like coping mechanism to kind of navigate it. I was tougher. I was said to be one of those tough parents. I would include the NYPD just to set that build a stronger relationship with the NYPD thanks to the school system in New York because I was not taking any disrespect. And I met a couple of principals who thought they could just brush me aside. And I was a single parent as well. When you're a single parent, schools don't take you seriously.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't think you're deserving of respect. Whereas if you had a man next to you, then it would be a different picture. And I couldn't tolerate that. I didn't tolerate that. So I almost hired the NYPD as my husband. And I would say things once. And if they didn't hear me, I'd just bring the NYPD. So it was tough. You asked me earlier, do I remember a very challenging phase in New York? That was one of those where I had to reach out to the NYPD. And sometimes I even had to put it in the New York Times because just the injustice and the disrespect, I couldn't tolerate it. And I realized that in New York City, if you're kind, if you're trying to be feminine, then people walk all over you. So that was a very actually empowering phrase. It was tough. It was just taxing. But I think raising a kid by myself for me is like the best gift I had ever been afforded. Because when you can raise a kid by yourself in New York City, you can run businesses. You can move the city. You can be the mayor of the city.
Tell me about it.
Yes. So I'm grateful to single parenting. It was tough, but it was building.
That's very beautiful because it's not something easy raising these children in this, especially as a single parent.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're not going to take you serious in the school environment. And, coming from South Africa, there's certain culture you have in approaching other parents. Something is going on. How can you address this? And I think what also help you, many people don't realize when you live in this country for a long time before having kids, you already understand how the system works compared to those who are just coming in and they come in with the children or they have the children right away. So you don't really have what it takes to navigate this society to see what are the differences that I want to bring into my household, have my children. Yeah. They're busy struggling to put food on the table, pay the bills and everything else, that they don't have the time to navigate, to understand how do you raise children in this country. You bring in the culture, but there's certain other things you have to change in your approach on how you raise these children. That's why you have many of our children now on social media complaining about African immigrant parents,
Yeah, there's so many in the city, so much to navigate, right? Because there's the home has to be stable. There has to be food on the table. There's the component of advocacy, self-advocacy. When I lived here and when I moved here, because in Africa we don't talk in those terms. That's like very sophisticated and very high end. People will talk about self-advocacy and be like, oh yeah, okay, sure. Listen, you have to advocate for yourself here. You have to. In the school system, not only did I reach out to the NYPD when I had challenges, I've written a letter to the to the chancellor of the school system. I had someone actually there's within a chancellor's office, there's someone who deals with special cases. I had access to that person.
He said this is special case, so
yeah, we had special cases, special needs, and when I wrote letters to Albany and they were not responding, I went through the chancellor's office. But to be able to even push things that far, because, in Africa, you take your kid to school and you move on. You're not expected to participate and be involved and to want to even change certain aspects of education. And I was not even in school that long. My son has been homeschooling for 8 years. But I can tell you from pre-K, I think from pre-K to third grade, I changed a lot of things. I wrote letters. I stood up for what didn't make sense. It was amazing. And then I started homeschooling and I realized, I've been wanting to be a principal all along. I just didn't know how to voice it out. Because when my son one day said to me, we were talking about something and said, I think the principal of my school will approve it. I was like, who's that?
You.
But he said, oh yes, I am the principal of the school.
So for many who may want to know, how has it been, that you intentionally preserve your South African culture at home? How have you been able to do that?
I think it's because, my mother, one of the things that my mother did that I really love is that she didn't take us in South Africa, it's called Model Cs, but in America, it's called private schools. My mother didn't take us to private schools. And when I asked her why, right, because it was trendy at the time and she had the money. I was like, why don't you take us to a private school? And she said to me, because I don't want you to lose your identity. And I was like, how are we going to lose our identity in a private school? And she said, because you would be taught how to be more white than it is necessary.
Yeah.
Whereas with the public schools in South Africa, you were getting the basic education, and then at home, you were getting the other education that you needed. And I was like, wow. So I've never, even as I said it earlier, I was always been very conflicted about belonging to a South African society, even as South African. Even with that complexity, I've always known it doesn't change the quality of who I am.
And how do you, being so much struggle in this country, these children, they suffer, they struggle with, they struggle with identity in terms of, are they Black? Are they African? So how do you teach your child about African identity?
So my son's curriculum, half of it is based on Africa.
Okay.
Right? To an extent where I won't be able to tell you some of the countries in Africa. Whereas with my son, if you put an African map, he can tell you each and every country, all 54 of them. I wasn't even aware it's 54 until he told me.
He's ahead.
Yeah, he's like, this is the East. I remember I was on a flight I think I was coming from New York going to Ethiopia going to South Africa. And he kept telling me, you're on the East, you're on the West, you're Central, you're this, you're that, you've crossed Chad, you've got this. He was going on and on. I was like, oh, wow. Even when he was flying, he flew through Germany and he was like, okay, so I'm right at the top. And this is where we're going to go, this country, because I've always insisted he has to the teachers who teach him. I don't teach him. I'm so glad for that. Yeah, he has teachers, but I've always insisted that they teach him about Africa. That like he read Things Fall Apart, right? And then he read another book by We Need New Names by a Zimbabwean writer.
Wow.
Yeah, but for me, my mother has never given me a reason to want to question my identity as a South African, as an African, as a Black person. She never gave me the opportunity to think something was wrong with it. So even though I knew I didn't quite fit within a South African context, I knew very well that I'm South African regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And has there ever been a moment where American culture and African parenting values conflicted in your home?
Yeah, we don't spank. Like in an American world, they don't spank. In Africa, we cow you as if there's no tomorrow. So I once hit my son with a spoon because he almost bent the apartment, And I think I did it out of shock. I realized after I finished that I think I reacted out of shock, and I was not really proud of how I reacted. So in the spirit of transparency, I make a mistake of disclosing this to the therapist, and they called child services, ACS on us. And I remember for like 2 weeks, I was like dodging ACS.
Wow.
I even took my son out to DC because they were knocking on my door. And I was like, I'm not opening the door until you take the matter to court. And they're like,
how to work the system?
We would just want to talk to you. I was like, no. You need a legal document to talk to me. So you're not going to be able to talk to me. You need to go to court. And so at 1 a.m. every day, they would come and knock.
Wow.
They even wanted to break the door and asked the super to break the door. And the super was like, I'm not doing that. She's a very good mother and we have a good relationship, but I'm not doing it. So when they finally took the matter to court, then they went to court and then they found out, the charges are not unfounded.
And that's one of the worries in this country that I would say is part of what many parents struggle, even their Native Americans who also struggle with that. We understand there's abuse, parents who abuse their children and everything like that. But, ordinary discipline or talking to a child, some other people will call ACS and then you are in water. So what worries you mostly about raising children in today's American society?
I actually don't have too many worries. I think because I'm just so focused on the things that I do.
Yeah.
And I don't believe in indulging in worry because I feel like it begins to attract the things we don't want.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? I'm big on goals, When I had my son, that was a goal and I needed to be focused and present about it. And in order for me to be present to it, I found a therapist for my son. I found a therapist for myself.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you're talking about therapists all throughout this conversation.
Yeah.
Young African immigrant community is something we don't believe in. We don't believe in it for our children or even for ourselves, So I'm glad you're talking about it because those who will listen to this will understand there's nothing wrong taking therapy, especially when you're struggling with so many things. And some people, like I tell some people, okay, you don't want therapy, you might not, okay, go and get self-help book that deals with the issue that you're struggling with. Maybe that will help you to understand things from another perspective.
Yeah.
Instead of digging yourself and talking to many people from your country who have the same kind of way of thinking, you will never come out of the hole.
Yeah. Therapy is key. For me, I've always had a therapy. I have art therapy, which is a group. I had a support group for 16 years. So for me, I don't travel without guidance.
Yeah.
Unless I want to be spontaneous and discover things. But I don't. I've had businesses. I've always had a mentor. As a parent, I didn't understand. One of my son's therapist once said something I only could have heard in therapy. She said, we're talking about school, and she said, school is a learning environment. That's how she put it. When she said that, I was like, oh my God, I so needed to hear this. School is a learning environment. When she said that, I was like, what am I learning in this environment? Because it is a school in its own right, right? But I needed to have someone say that to bring this to a bigger context. Life is a school and we're learning and one of the things we are never taught enough is how to protect ourselves in this context. In any country.
That's true. Well, and what advice would you offer African immigrant parents raising their children in the diaspora? Because, someone like you have a lot to share.
As Africans, we don't organize enough, right? And because of our colonial background, history, we almost don't know how to respect each other. And so we're not open to learning from one another. Personally, I am a South African, very proud South African, but I can tell you that I have access to all kinds of communities, other African communities, outside of just African. I have a friend in almost every race. Yeah. Because being disorganized or not being organized in New York is a handicap, right? You can never raise a kid by yourself. You can never build alone. I'll tell you in terms of kids, when I was raising my son, he's the only kid. I was very much aware that I don't want him growing by himself. So I partnered with 3 other mothers. I would tell them, okay, one weekend I take the kids, the next weekend you take the kids, and we work together. If there's opportunity, we bring to the table, we share it, we all share it. If you know of resources, we bring everything to the table.
It's beautiful.
To a point where it took a while for my son to even be aware that he's the only kid. And just the idea of being by himself just never worked. Like, he was like, oh, take me to my friend's kids, and I would have to stand up and take him there and come back and go pick him up. Or sometimes he would sleep over because I trust the home. But you can't raise a kid by yourself. I know that the environment here sometimes can push for individualism, but you cannot raise a kid by yourself. Being African, we have to be very intentional about our Africanness, right? And we can't do this individually. Teach your kids about Africa. Make Africa a priority. Teach your kids to build for Africa. Because at the end of the day, I don't have to worry about racism if I know I have a home in Africa.
Yeah.
Where I can do, I am given the right to be myself and do the things I need to do. Then I don't have to scramble for opportunity with other white people in America, right? Because I have a place to fall back on. As Africans, we don't value Africa. We don't see it as a resource. We don't see it as an opportunity. We don't think it's our right to build ideas. And even when we do, we work in silos. And even when a person tries to collaborate, because we have a mindset of scarcity, we will fight over 200,000. And I'm talking about an experience that I went through. 200,000, it's something worth fighting over. And I always tell people, New York City is a wealthy city. 200,000 is a drop in the ocean. Like, it's not a big deal. There's so much money. I don't even know where to start. So we don't have to fight, right? And we have to collaborate. Whether you're Muslim or you're Christian or you are without a religion, your responsibility is to another African. Your responsibility is to Africa. I'm big on Africa. I'm like, I told you, I sleep, wake up, Africa. I'm African. I brought in 2 people to come and stay with me. They're both African because I didn't want my son to be raised in any other environment. The work I do is strictly about Africa.
We have to.
Yeah.
And I want to bring you, I hope you have time for me today.
Sure.
I want to bring you to race, identity, and America. This is difficult but necessary conversation. You came from a society that legislates racial separation.
Yeah.
In America, the conversation is loud, complex, and often painful, and it doesn't stop at white America. There are deep complexity with other community of color as well. South Africa versus America. As South African who lived under apartheid legacy, what surprised you most about racial discussion in America's society? Is it easier for you to understand institutionalized racism here because of your background?
That is, it's a beautiful question, right? I even wish we could just have a forum for that question. Yeah, because it's one of those questions that need to be, or conversations that have to be had ongoing, right? Because the more you talk about it, the more we can begin to see that sometimes we give racism more power than it needs, right? The system here is designed to divide and conquer. There's no doubt about it. When you're Black, you're not a priority, right? It doesn't bother me as much because I come from South Africa. And in South Africa, white people go through the same thing. They're not a priority. So coming here, it didn't cut too deep because I understand that when you understand the game for what it is, it's a power game, right? It doesn't stop you from getting the things you want to get. You just have to be stronger. And I always tell Black people, You have to walk into America as if you're a white man. To be specific, a Jewish man. The mindset has to be, I'm a Jewish man and I'm untouchable and everyone is going to have to give me what I want, right? I once said to a friend of mine who's African American, when we're talking about resources and who's entitled to in New York, I said to her, sometimes when it comes to New York City resources, because the white group feels more entitled to them. When you're Black, you have to walk in as if you have two AK-47s and you just give me what I want. I won't cause any sin. But you have to know how to demand, right? You have to know how to say, listen, I'm not interested whether you see me as a Black person, but I have a right to do this. And you have to be strategic and you have to pull out. There are so many layers of accountability in this space. One thing that I really love about New York, right? If for an example, I am dealing with Department of Education and they're not giving me what I want because of race. Let's just say for an example. I can write a letter to the Human Rights Commission. I can bring in the Inspector General. You don't even know how many Inspector Generals I've written letters to. But yeah. And so I think as Black people, we because we're so focused on racism and how unjust it is, we're missing the bigger picture of how we can stop being active participants in the oppression of self. Because I think for us, the challenge is we self-oppress quicker than the white person can oppress us.
Yeah. Because it's the conversation going on around us all the time. White people this, white people that. What move have you made to make a change? And you are so right about that. And even among the white people, even among them, other white people have to be part of that group in order for them to look at them. Just because they are white does not mean they will get into the door.
Thank you.
They have to know somebody who knows somebody. That's why they say, oh, do you know this, Jewish guy? Do you know this person? Do you know this person? Go on. And that's among themselves. Because just because they are white does not mean they open the door for you and they give you the opportunity. But you demand and you walk towards what you demand.
Yeah, and that's the strength of a Jewish society, right? Is they figure this thing out. This thing is a power game. How do we become powerful? We empower each other. We open doors for each other. We fight together. We challenge the system together. Because when you're one person and you're challenging the system and you fight, it's tedious.
Yes. Or they leave you behind. That's not my problem.
Yes.
That's your problem. It's really sad, but we have to continue to share another narrative of looking at things on a different lens. Not on the same direction everybody has been looking at, because it flows everybody to the same direction. I remember I was downstairs in my building doing laundry, and this young man, I was actually looking whether my washing machine already finished, and he looked at me, said, "You looking at me?" I said, "You should consider yourself lucky to be looked at." I said, "This is the problem with a lot of young men like you." I said, when somebody acknowledged, even I wasn't looking at you, but if I am looking at you, you should feel proud that someone actually see you standing there. I said, from the culture where I came from, to look at you is to acknowledge. Then I started giving him a compliment. I said, "Look at your beautiful face. Look at how good." And he looked at me and said, "Thank you, miss."
Yeah, because he comes from a culture that no longer acknowledges. People don't maintain eye contact. They pass you by as if they don't see you. But we are not socialized to live like that. How do we build community if we are passing each other by as if we're strangers, but we're doing this every day?
Yes. These men, how do you expect them to go for job interview?
There you go.
When they cannot have eye contact? How do you expect them to feel confident in white space, so-called white space, okay, and demand and ask for what they want and look at people straight in the eyes with confidence to speak?
Yeah, I deserve this. I want this. I need this.
And they work hard for that.
Yes.
So we have to actually look at what is going on within our own community themselves.
Yeah.
Who we are as individuals. And, there's a lot of therapies that is needed. There's a lot. And it's not a joke. You understand what I'm saying? Because it has to bring you out.
Yeah, but listen to this. 2 years ago, I met an African guy from Mauritania, and he was telling me the story of how he came through the border. And I said to him, you need to get a therapist. I didn't even beat around the bush, because with me, I have almost 20 years of therapy, whether it's individual therapy, it's a group therapy, it's art therapy. If we put together, it's like a solid 20 years. I said, you need therapy. And he said, why? I said, because the journey of travel, you have traveled requires you to reflect and begin to acknowledge where certain things didn't go right and work on those things. And he was like, he answered me in a true African fashion. I have to be strong. I'm fine. I was like, okay, sure. 2 years later, he's running. He comes to the phone. He calls me. He seldom calls me. Normally we text each other. And he goes, can you please just make time to talk to me? So I said, okay, when I finish my meetings, I finished the meetings and then I called him. Is everything okay? He said, 2 years ago, you said I need to see a therapist. And I said, sure. And he said, I think I need one now. And I said to him, what happened? He said, I slapped someone at work. And I said, oh, this is not Africa where you can slap someone and everything is. In America, that's a violation. So luckily, we were putting together therapists that focus on West Africans, to be specific, men. But we're creating a list of other therapists for other regions. But we have a good organization called African Services where they have one person that we know. And I referred him to her. And he came back to me and he said, the therapist said he can feel the weight of my voice, that I actually need help. I said, that's exactly what I meant, because you've just crossed a border and there's a story you're not telling about it. And I can tell you, you're not telling it because it's tough, right? Had it been easy, you would be rejoicing for joy, you'd be sharing. But you're on mute because it's a tough journey. And then you're walking to a country where you've been promised the American dream. And now you're coming to terms with the American dream and it feels like a betrayal. And you're not articulating that. I said, then things are going to start pissing you off and you're going to start hitting people at work. So now he's seeing the therapist, of which I'm very happy for him. But it's important to give voice to what does not work.
That's so true. That is so true. And, I just want to throw this in. There's often a narrative that African America connect better with South Africans due to the sheer struggle of segregation. Black Americans dealt with Jim Crow. The Black South African dealt with apartheid. Do you find this to be true in your experience?
I don't think we connect better, and I don't know what connecting better is, right? Our struggles are different, right? I can relate to Jim Crow, but one thing I always tell other Africans or people about the apartheid system is that, yes, it was an unjust system, right? But it's easily assumed that every South African who was in South Africa went through it the same way. And I'm one of those people who can't relate to the struggle of the apartheid system, right? I didn't feel a harsher apartheid system. And so I'm not going to show up in the same way, right? And it may be true for other South Africans, but I personally have been struggling to bond with other African Americans. Maybe it's because, and I tend to bond more with Jews, right? I think maybe it's because my approach is I'm big on collaboration.
Yeah.
I stand for collaboration. You're Nigerian, you're my sister. You are Ghanaian, the love is real for every African. And it's not a mouthpiece. It's a fact, right? So I open up to connect with everyone. And one thing I've found on my part about African Americans is because I don't bond as well long term with them because there's a way that they handle things that don't work for me. There's a lack in compassion at which they hold in going through life, right? One of the things I find this is common in Africans, but in African Americans as well, is not knowing how to repair. If we fight, then it's a crisis. Now we're not talking. And I'm like, no. People fight all the time. We vary in perspective. It doesn't make us enemies. So maybe it's true for a lot of South Africans, but for me, it's not.
So you said something that the apartheid didn't affect you that much. Can you further explain that?
So during the apartheid system, there were three groups of people, right? So there were families that were connected to the political side of things, the struggle. There were people out of fear who chose to be neutral.
Okay.
Like they didn't want to participate in politics. They just wanted to have a job and move on and raise their kids.
Okay.
And then there was the group that was allowed to do business. I'm part of the group that was allowed to do business. So in my family, we had access to the white world. My grandfather had access to the Chinese world, the small group of Chinese who were in South Africa. The people who were bruised by the apartheid system were people who were connected politically.
Okay.
right? Because they were haunted, they were hit, they had to skip the country. It was brutal. Whereas there are people who really didn't, even though we all suffered because we're under the same system, we didn't come out the same because we were in different parts of experiencing the apartheid system. Yeah. So it's easy for people to just assume that I have a bruised relationship with white people. Actually, I have a strong relationship with the white world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because many people would not understand. They would think every color people, just like in America here, every color people, whether even they are mixed, they went through segregation and all this other Jim Crow, all this other area of different segregation that took place historically.
Yeah.
So someone wouldn't know that it's different set of people coming from different, area. And that brought me to the xenophobia and intra-Black relationship. Many African immigrants are surprised to experience discrimination from other Black community. At the same time, South Africans continue to struggle with xenophobia towards fellow Africans. How do you interpret the rise in xenophobia in South Africa today?
It speaks to a larger problem. In South Africa or in any part of Africa, right? We don't create strong systems for immigration the way America does, or even the way Europe does. Right. And so because we were so excited about our freedom, we allowed other Africans to come in, right? Instead of creating a system, almost like an equivalent of an American system. Here you're coming in to build.
Yeah.
We're not coming in to build, stay where you are, or we'll throw you in jail, or we'll deport you, right? I think because with us, we come with a background of oppression, unhealed wounds, lack of systems to govern and manage our lives. We don't have that next to a white world that have those in place already. So we almost don't know how to manage the relationship of what it means to accept other Africans, right? We still have borders within Africa, where as an African, if I'm going to Senegal, I need a visa. But if I'm going to Ghana, I don't need a visa. So we still have those dividing dynamics. My feeling is that as South Africans, we needed to create a system and for every foreigner to come in, right? And because we did not, we've allowed people to come in, whether it's from Africa or from outside of Africa, because our policing system is also not strong.
Yeah.
People have come in, they can see that it's a paradise for breaking the law. And they come in, they break the law. And we're sick and tired of it. So what's happening is a reaction of being sick and tired of having allowed people to take advantage of us. I don't see South Africa being right. I don't see the other Africans being right. I think what we should be doing is to have something we don't do as much. Let's sit down and have a conversation about what's not working as people who care for each other. We don't care for each other. That's the underlying issue here, right? Because when I care for you and I have a problem with you, I'm going to take the time, sit down with you and tell you what's not working, right? And when you care for me as well, we will try and find a way to make it work for both you and I. But as Africans, we're not socialized to care for each other. So what you see happening in South Africa is a lack of care and compassion. It has happened in Nigeria in terms of Ghana. I think it has happened in Ghana in terms of Nigeria as well. The issues that we don't see ourselves as one. We think we're different. We think we're separate. You'll be shocked how many times I exclusively shop in African stores, 70% of the time or 80% of the time. And there's a store that is run by a guy from Guinea. And one day, I think I went there about 4 or 5 times. But the 6th time, I said, every time I'm here at the store, you treat me like I'm a new customer all the time. What's happening? I am loyal in my need to support you on a continuous basis in buying products. I'll even tell the person who helps me, you have to buy these products here. Don't go to Whole Foods, go here, right? And I said to him, but every time I feel like we're strangers, every time I come to the store, you don't acknowledge me as a customer. Is it because I'm South African? And this was before this. Yeah. And he said, no. I said, we should strike a conversation and talk. And you must acknowledge me and recognize me as a person who's loyal to the store. You can't pretend as if I'm not coming here. I exist. I'm now part of your customer base. You have to show a level of appreciation. You don't have to give me anything for free. I'm not interested in that. But just acknowledge me.
And you are so right about setting up a system where visa migration and let people know, are you there to work? Are you there to stay? And build a system that works, because that's what is wrong with all over Africa. When Nigeria did it with Ghana, same, they only focus on Ghana. At that time, when Ghana too got upset, they focus on Nigeria, not other Africans there, and say, all of you have to leave.
Yeah.
They focus on Nigerians. The same thing, Nigeria focus on Ghana, not other Africans. And in many cases, we tend to blame immigrants, which is what is going on in America here too. Why do you think they often blame immigrants during economic hardship?
Yeah, because some people work with the blaming system, right? And when you don't belong, it's almost like being in a home that is not your home. You don't have rights there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who's frustrated can just take out their frustration on you. It's not because you are the cause, but because you're just an easy outlet. Yeah. So when you don't belong to that place, you can be blamed. You can be accused even for things you haven't done because you're not a priority. So as immigrants, even though New York City is built by immigrants, in an American context, we're not a priority.
Yeah.
We don't belong here. And they keep reminding us, even your citizenship, we can snatch it back. Don't come here with stories because we can get rid of you.
And there's also issue of, I think, stereotype too, that whether we're talking about America or anywhere in Africa, to stereotype certain set of people, oh, these are the people who are doing this. Even though majority of them are not doing, maybe you pick one or two people up that they may be doing it, but you generalize it and said every one of them is doing it.
Yeah.
What role does education play in reducing stereotype?
Formal education or just education in general?
Just, education in general, because you come to a place, let's assume, I'm new in South Africa. Maybe they caught, as a Nigeria, they caught Nigerians somewhere who were doing, fraud or carrying drugs, and all Nigerians are like this.
Yeah.
But, you don't see when a white person, a Jewish person did something and they say all Jews are like that.
Yes.
You understand? Or all whites are like that. Is it
Mhm.
we're taking responsibility in terms of when something happened, we think it's us that did it. When
Yeah.
somebody did something among our group, we tend to look at the blame as if we are also responsible, or they will start looking at us the same way.
Mhm. I think it speaks to what I've just said. We don't take the time to know each other, to get to know each other. When you are seen as a foreigner in a space, locals have a tendency to distance themselves because they feel like you have nothing to offer. They're also not interested in it, right? It's almost like the story I was talking about when I said I'm going to a supermarket and I'm not acknowledged as a customer. It's almost like I'm starting a new relationship every time I go to shop. Yet I know the store in and out. I know where to find what. But we have to be socialized. And my mother was good at this thing. Teaching you to see the person, right, beyond the story. As Africans, so last year I started volunteering for a not-for-profit called Africana. And when I was volunteering for Africana, it's the woman who founded it is from Guinea. And so the majority of the people who are being served are from Guinea. And I would go. I remember the first time when I went, they were looking at me as if I'm there to steal something. And I came to volunteer. So I sat down with them and I said, listen, I can't come here to help you and you look at me suspiciously. I'm here for the right reasons and I want you to ask me as many questions as you need to, right? So I started working and then they could see, okay, this person is genuinely, she's loyal, she's honest, she wants to help. But one of the things I did out of my own pocket is that I realized, I'm serving people who I don't know whether they're African. I get it, but I have not been in the countries. So I took my money and I went to the countries because I wanted to understand the mindset, right? Because a lot of people are challenged under this environment. If it's not a language barrier, it's a class barrier, it's a gender barrier, it's a religion barrier. I can keep going. Right. And these are barriers that are blocking the opportunity, access into opportunity. And New York City requires a certain mindset. You can't survive in New York City with an African mindset. You need the sophistication of a New York mindset, right? But I had to go to different parts of Africa, Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Ethiopia. I can keep going. To begin to understand what influences certain decisions, how are people arriving at certain things. You see it in in a Muslim world, like women are secondary. And you're like, how do you make this woman secondary? This woman brings kids to earth, takes care of them, makes sure the husband is stable in terms of food, home, eating, and this person has a secondary role, and they're not even being sent, right? You go to Senegal and you're at the airport, and the guy almost wants to walk on top of you because they don't see you. So where was I going with this?
No, we're just talking about the role of education in reducing
Yeah.
stereotype, and which is very, very important. And you mentioned so many things in terms of which is what you are doing in your organization, the responsibility of immigrant having to build a strong relationship with local communities. That's very, very important. And I know, and that brings me to your career, your education reinvention. Let's shift gear now to incredible professional journey. You are a powerhouse.
Thank you.
You launched African Desk.
Yes.
The original story, you started your career in South Africa, fashion and media scene. How did you initially get into this industry? What sparked your interest? I know your mom,
My hero.
and I hope she's eating all the food and joy of it.
You know what's interesting? That my mother and I didn't have a close relationship. I just admired her a lot because I think I have most of her characteristics, right? So we didn't have a bonding relationship. But because I admired her a lot, just because of being able to raise 5 kids by yourself and still do an exceptional job, both at home, financially. Yeah. So what was the question again?
I mean, how did you get initially into that industry? What sparked your interest in fashion?
So, as I mentioned, my mother loved fashion. The first time I saw Salvatore Ferragamo, Gucci, I don't think Louis Vuitton was as big at the time, but Gucci, definitely Salvatore Ferragamo, big Amalfi. I can keep going on. The European brands. My mother loved fashion.
Wow.
Not only did she love it, she bought a lot of fashion. And so she had a closet. My mother was a New Yorker in Africa. She had a closet for coats, a closet for dresses, a closet for, she had different closets. And then she had a kist. I don't know if you know what a kist is.
No.
A kist is almost like something that complements a closet, wardrobe. Inside called a wardrobe. It's where you put your sheets and towels and things like that. It's a trunk. It's almost like a trunk. So I remember she had like maybe 15, 20 pairs of shoes, all of them brand labels, right? So I just and she used to love dressing up and everything else. And I didn't realize how much that influenced me to a point where my first love became fashion and my first love became fashion publishing. So when I designed my first magazine and I sold it to a publishing house and they hired me, that was the way I stepped into the fashion industry. And then before I knew it, I was working for different publishing houses in South Africa. And so when I came to New York, the natural order, and when I applied for my visa, by the way, I applied for my own visa and it got approved. And it was a media visa because I was a member of the media.
Yeah.
It got approved. That allowed me when I heard that New York Fashion Week was going to take place when I moved here, right? I moved here in June and then New York Fashion Week took place in September. I remember thinking to myself, do I belong to New York Fashion Week? I went and I said to them, how do I register as the member of the press? And they gave me a form. I filled it out and I gave it to them. And then they said, send us your press clippings. I sent them my press clippings. And they said I was approved. And I was like, okay, I can do New York Fashion Week now. Okay. So that was a natural progression from being a journalist, a fashion journalist in South Africa and working for different publications. And then stepping into New York and New York Fashion Week introduced me to the fashion industry in New York.
That's so powerful. On African Desk, for those listening, what exactly is Africa Desk?
Yes.
How have you been using it to build strategic partnership with others? Because some people might say, mention what you just said now, that you just walked in and said, how can I come to this? You didn't say, how we know it from Africa? Who can I speak to speak to this person? You just went in and asked questions.
So we founded Africa Desk almost 10 years ago, right? It's because I looked around and realized, oh my goodness, there is a niche in the market in America. Africa is invisible. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm tired of sitting in tables and conversations where automatically people assume I'm a second-class citizen by virtue of being Black or being African. And people don't feel they can engage me in any conversation except for racism. And I've said to so many people, don't talk to me about racism. I'm not a good person. I'm not well versed on racism. You need to find another Black person who can indulge you. But I don't do racism. I do Africa, right?
Oh my God.
You ask me about Africa, I'll give you the layers, give you the story. But racism, I'm not really well versed in it. And they're like, doesn't it affect you? And someone once asked me, hey, what's the term I'm looking for? Patriarchy. Doesn't it affect?
Patriarchy.
Yes. Doesn't it affect you? I was like, no, because men understand that if they come to me, I'm going to punish them. And so they stand clear of this closing door.
Or they come in and bow down.
Oh, yeah, because they test me. I mean, I have an amazing relationship with men. Men understand that if there's a playground, it's not going to be Yolanda. So when they come in, they test and I say no. And men don't like a no. Yeah. You know, they don't like women who are not agreeable. I never have problems after that. You know, it's almost like within a white world. They understand that if they try the racism route, it's not going to work. It's going to fail them because I'm very strategic in using the same tools that white people use to get what I need.
Where do you see Hope African Desk will be in 10 years?
So at Africa Desk, what we do is that we go to big brands and say, we want to put the Africa agenda within your institution or within your brand, right? So we've worked with Tribeca Film Festival. We have worked with UNESCO. We are talking to NYU because we want a permanent space. We've worked with Fashion Law at Fordham. But we're now looking for permanent homes because we want to have a permanent home within NYU. We want a permanent home within New York Times. But we want more permanent homes where we can push the Africa agenda every day. Right.
I have many African models now that they're getting from so many different parts of Africa, and they are modeling. And
yes.
It's time for you to reach that space as well. There's nothing wrong in that.
Yeah, and one thing we do at Africa Desk that we're now very intentional about, and we've actually just submitted a proposal to the city of New York, is we want to be the bridge for the creative industry. Not just the creative industry, for all other aspects of Africa, but mainly creativity. We are the bridge between Africa and New York. So we want to encourage New York City or the city of New York to support Africa in its development and just building.
And as if that's not enough, you are not just building a career, you are building a community. You launch a non-profit organization. Yes. Many people see non-profit as charitable organization. Your vision appears to be broader. You are building systems that create long-term opportunity. What inspired you to launch the African Community Forum?
Okay. So AFCOFO is the name of the nonprofit. It stands for Africa Community and Forum. So we founded Africa Community and Forum because we realized, New York City needs you to be organized, right? As a group. You are not organized, then you are not powerful. And as I told you, I was tired of sitting in a conversation as an African where people think they can only engage me through racism or they just don't see me. I'm not visible. Right. So last year, we launched 3 campaigns. First one, Partnerships for Africa, which is going to be the bridge between New York City and Africa. The second one, Partnerships for Africans. We recognize that in order for us to build for a better Africa from New York City, we need to build up Africans as well.
Yeah.
So if you look around, I'm sure you're aware, we don't hold positions of power anywhere. We are a minority. Right, within different systems, different organizations, but we don't have power. And that's a problem, right? Mm. Even in workforce, we don't benefit as much. There's not much reinvestment that is done in relation to our communities because we're not visible. Yeah. We're very much invisible.
Yeah.
So AFCOFO is changing that, right? We as I said, we've presented a document to the city of New York to make Africans visible, right? But another layer, so the first part is workforce. We are creating workforce and we're dealing, one of the divisions of workforce is mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we realize that a lot of Africans, we isolate without even realizing that we're isolating, right? Because of the history of oppression, we have grown to know how to play small,
Yeah.
do small,
Yeah.
be small, right? But we want to change that. We want we want Africans to understand they can run a division or an agency in New York, but more than anything, they can build ideas for Africa.
Yes. Yes.
Using New York as a resource,
Mm-hmm.
right? We give to New York, we pay into the New York system,
Yeah.
but we don't know how to teach New York City to pay back it to us.
Yes.
And so, yes, so workforce and entrepreneurship are the backbones of Africa Community and Forum. But to support that, two components, mental health,
Yeah.
especially for our men. Our men need a lot of mental health support, and also English as a second language for a lot of Francophone West Africans who are here, who are not able to access the opportunity in New York.
Yeah.
So we're creating those opportunities for Africans in New York because we believe that Africans are just as much entitled to the opportunities and the resources of New York City.
And that's very powerful what you just said, because we have many of these groups who so-call themselves that they represent Africa. They go to borough president's office to just, talk back and forth with each other without coming up with anything. And for many times, people have asked, would you like to come? I said, no, I can't sit down with people who just sit down and talk. And everybody, they try to struggle with power among themselves. Not reaching anywhere.
Yeah.
Without actually demanding that these are the unique things our community needs.
Yeah. Right? There's a lack of awareness in what game are we playing, right? Because New York City is a game in its own right, but it's a wide game. And in order to belong into certain systems, you have to play a wide game. What we have yet to do is to tailor the wide game to the needs of Africa so that we can still play the game and win the African way.
Because, here, many of these people, they are not doing research to find out what are the issues African immigrants are facing. Gather people in academia together who could do research for you to understand what are the dynamics, the issue African immigrants are facing.
Yeah.
Because the Latino that they're getting funding for their community, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Okay, they gather evidence, prove, research work, present it.
Yeah.
To the community, get funding for their community to address their unique
needs.
Because they know Black African American cannot address their unique cultural issues.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for the Africans. Nobody else can come in and address our issue unless we do it ourselves and then bring people in.
Yeah, and we also have to be effective because we're conflicted. We're self-conflicted, right? Because sometimes I feel, and this is an African ugly dynamic. Mm-hmm. In Africa, when you're in a position of power, you're not there to make a difference. You're there to empower yourself.
Yeah.
It's a self-serving platform, right? And even when you're put in a position of power, you're not given the right to own the power and move things in a direction. I supported a not-for-profit where they wanted me to be the director of a division, but they didn't want me to have a right to a say to the budget. And I was like, this is not Africa. This is New York. So I stepped down and I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not playing the African game in the New York setting. So that's what happens in an African context, is that people are given power without being afforded the power to move things and shift things in a direction. And for as long as we are playing that game, we're playing the game of self-defeat. Mm-hmm. Then we are in cahoots with racism. Yeah. We're active participants in our own oppression. Yeah. So we have to, we can play the white game because sometimes that's exactly what you need to survive New York, but play it in a way that it benefits Africans.
Yeah, your community.
Yeah.
So what impact do you mostly proud of so far? Because I don't know how you do this. Your biggest goal for what are your biggest goal for the next decade?
Is to, personally, I want Africans to be visible in New York. That's key for me, right? But we're not just building in New York. We're building in Africa as well. So our not-for-profit So Africa Desk in New York is a for-profit. In Africa, it's a non-profit. We're centralizing the fashion, film, and photography industries in Africa. In New York, we're lobbying for the interests of Africa. And then through Africa Community and Forum, we're focusing on workforce. All these things are connected, right? It's almost hard to. People say you're doing a lot. Believe me, it's so easy in my mind. It does not feel like a lot at all. You can wake me up at 1 o'clock and you're like, okay, how do we move this piece? I'm like, move it to the side. It's so easy. People get overwhelmed when I tell them that the goal is big. I was like, big for who? Big for you, but definitely not for me. For me, this is a movement, and this is how a movement moves. I'm proud. For me, my biggest pride is being a mother. Yes, that's a big deal for me because, I don't think I would do the kind of work that I do had it not been for motherhood. Motherhood is a school, right? Parenting is a school in its own right. And I think it has given birth to the importance of being committed, following through. I cannot even begin to emphasize enough why follow through in New York City is a must do. The power to build big, the power to build for Africa strictly, the power to raise a kid who understands that even as they are American, their priority is Africa, and that they have to know Africa in and out so that they can bring solutions to Africa. I insist on that when it comes to my son. You are building not just for yourself, you are building for your kids, you're building for the next generation and the generations after. But your Africa is a priority. So to have been able to parent and then build Africa Desk and then Africa Community and Forum. And I told you, African Community and Forum, we built it under a year, right? Even though we founded it 3 years ago. But the work we're doing is so impressive. It's so supported. And I'm also proud to have volunteered at a not-for-profit called Africana because it gave me, I've always been in touch with West Africa, especially Francophone West Africa. I love Senegalese food, so I eat a lot of Senegalese food. I'm in love with food from Guinea now. But working at Africana gave me an opportunity to stay close to West Africa in a way that I never thought possible. Build up relations, right? I like the fact that every time I go to any part of Africa, I stay with a family. I don't even stay in a hotel. I just rent a space and I stay with them. I get to eat what everyone is eating. If they're eating by hand, I'm eating by hand. If they're using a fork, I'm using a fork. But it's very grounding, very fulfilling. I can bounce from Dakar Fashion Week, of which we do every year, to running out of a meeting at 1 p.m. because I'm running home in Dakar to go and eat lunch. And I take out my fancy clothes and then I just wear something to wrap around. And I go and I sit there and I'm eating from the same dish with everybody. Small things like that make traveling so fulfilling, but they bring me close to each and every culture. So for me to have volunteered at Africana has been quite a gift.
Yeah, it is. It is. Which bring me, we're almost done to your leadership and legacy. What does success mean to you?
For me, success is building ideas that are going to benefit now and the next generations. Success for me right now is building for a better Africa. For me, that's huge. I love New York. It fulfills me at many levels. One of the things I really, really love about New York is the power to stand up and say it's enough. And if nobody will hear you, is to use the different agencies to make people hear you. Is the importance of consistency. New York City is consistent. I never wake up in New York thinking I want to do something and not understand that it will be done. I don't have that in New York. If I woke up and said I want to meet the mayor and I'm meeting the mayor next week, I know I'm going to find a path to meet the mayor. When we said we're going to build a bigger agency for workforce strictly for Africans, we said it, and within 3 months we became the vendor of New York City, meaning we now legally have a right to ask the city to tap into the RFPs and look at opportunities and tailor it for Africans. So to have been able to achieve it under 6 months for me is a big deal. To have been able to have a 501c3 under 10 days is huge. So I love New York City for that. I know that I can in New York. I'm learning to use the same principle to understand that I can in terms of Africa. Because we have a lot of stumbling blocks in Africa, a lot of barriers that don't allow people to become. But when you are using New York to access Africa, it's a different ballgame.
And what legacy do you hope to leave anyway? With all these things you are so involved in, somebody has to catch up to you.
I want Africans in New York to understand they don't have to lose their identity to be New Yorkers, and they don't have to lose their Africanness within the space. But that is their responsibility to build for Africa. I think for every African who is in New York, who is in the US, it's your duty. Don't run chasing the same opportunity that the white world is chasing, because they see that as competition and they see that as diminishing resources. Use the tools here. They're excellent tools to hold the system accountable, or use them for Africa. I'll give you one quick example. My son went to Senegal. He stayed there for like 2.5 months. When it was time to come back, he couldn't come back because Air Senegal stopped flying to New York. So being a single parent, I looked at the ticket and it was like 2,000. I was like, I'm not paying 2,000 for that ticket because I already had paid for the return. So I was like, this is an American citizen. I reached out to the embassy and I said, your person
Is there?
who is my son is stuck in Senegal. So they said, oh, we are aware because Senegal is no longer flying to New York. So I said, I need your support in bringing him back. And they wanted to give me a tough time. I think it was racism, right? They wanted to drag their feet. And when I could see that there's a game now being played, I asked to speak to the consul general. And they were like, why would the consul general want to talk to you? I was like, because he's here to serve Americans. So I may not be an American, but I live with an American. And so they said, no, we're not going to give you. First of all, they said they won't give me her name. And I said, okay, what's the first name? They said her name is Sophia. So I was like, the woman who helped me with my coffee this morning, her name is Sophia. Is that the Sophia who's the consul general? They're like, oh, you want the last name? I was like, yes, I want the full name. They were like, no, we're not going to give it to you. I said, no problem. I went online, and because I'm a journalist, doing research comes easy. I went online to check who holds the consulate accountable. And I found out the Inspector General. So I wrote the letter to the Inspector General. In the letter, I wrote, American miner stuck in Senegal. And within like an hour, they came back. They called me. They didn't even write back. They're like, is your name Yolanda? I was like, yes. They're like, your son is stuck in Senegal. Is it safe? I was like, yes, it's safe, but he can't come home. He can't come home to start the school. And they're like, so help us understand what happened. So I explained to them, listen, people have been disrespecting me left and right. And they're like, who disrespected you the most? I was like, the consul general doesn't want to talk to me. And they're like, she's going to write you a letter. By the time you wake up, you will have a letter there. By the time I woke up, there was a letter. Within 48 hours, they had bought the ticket to bring my son to New York. And he was here. And I was like, yeah, the American dream.
You tap into what that's the responsibility of U.S. consulate. That's what they're supposed to do. And so many Africans, so many of our people don't tap into those because they feel stranded.
Because we feel we're not entitled.
Yes.
We just belong. This is not our place to feel entitled to. We don't see it as a home. Even when we stay here 30 years, we think we're passing through.
Yeah.
So we don't hold the system accountable. And then the system knows it doesn't have to account to us because...
Yeah, and other community are grabbing it because they understand how it works. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy for what you're doing. I'm so proud of what you're doing. With the organization and your non-profit organization that you have. I could keep you here all day. You have so much wisdom to share. But
Thank you.
I'm just going to say thank you for sharing your remarkable journey with us today. Your story may remind us that immigration is much more than crossing the border. It's about resilience, reinvention, preserving identity and creating opportunities for others.
Yeah.
Which is what is needed in our community. Through your leadership at African Community Forum and the African Deaths, you are helping African immigrants not only in surviving in a new country, but thriving while remaining connected to their heritage. To everyone listening, I hope this conversation has inspired you to think more deeply about identity, community, leadership, and the important role Africans immigrants play in strengthening society on both sides of the Atlantic. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Pansa Pansa Podcast. leave us a review, share this conversation with your family, your friend, your community. Your support help us to continue bringing thoughtful conversation that amplify African voices and experience from around the world. Until next time, keep learning, keep building bridges, and remember that every journey has the power to inspire others. Thank you so much, Yolanda.
Yeah, I wanted to close by saying that being an immigrant is a full-time job.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pansa Pansa Live Podcast. We hope to have you back with us in the next episode as we continue to explore the nuances of the African immigrant experience. If you'd like to connect with us, you can email us at talk@pansapansa.org. That is talk@pansapansa.org. And follow us on Instagram at pansa.pansaforum. Until next time, remember to spread kindness and love. Thank you and take care of yourself.